that we're going to conclude the public portion of this meeting an hour early at 3 p.m. today so we can take our mandatory ethics training that's required by CTA. And before I turn it over to our Vice Chair, Michelle Lee, for the roll call, on behalf of the committee, I want to welcome Doreen Bogus, who's a former coworker of mine and a very frequent user of public transportation here in the city. And Doreen, welcome again to the committee. And when your name comes up on the roll we're going to conclude just give us a little, give everyone a little background about yourself. So with that said, Michelle Lee, would you please take it from here?
Hi everyone. This is Michelle. So I'm going to be in charge of the roll call. I'm going to read your name, just say here, present, and then an organization if you're with one. And first, Mary Abramson.
I'm here and I'm representing myself.
Awesome. Next up, Joe. We know you're here.
Present and an advocate.
Awesome. And Lovell Bates.
He is not here.
So Lovell's absent. Pamela Berman.
I know she's here. Pam? I know she's here.
Maybe she's on mute. Pam, are you here?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. This is Michelle. We can hear you.
Sorry, it's Pam Berman. I'm with Guide Dogs for the Blind.
Awesome. Next up, we have Doreen Bogus.
Hello, this is Doreen Bogus, and I'm here representing the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. And as Joe requested, I will give you a brief, brief information. I used to represent the MOPD on the committee many years ago, up until 2014. I left due to term limits, and now I'm back. And I have worked with the city of Chicago since 1995, and I work in our Disability Resources Division as a disability specialist, and I work out of our field office location over on Ogden, primarily with the independent living program, the personal assistance component, and other duties as assigned.
Great, thank you. This is Michelle again. So welcome, Doreen. Next up on roll call, we have Bridget Heyman.
I'm here.
Hi, Bridget.
Hi.
And next up we have Whitney Hill.
Here, and I'm here with LCM Architects in Spork.
Awesome, thanks, Whitney. Robin Jones.
Hello, it's Robin Jones, and I'm with the Great Lakes ADA Center.
Awesome, thank you. Next up, Michael Kaiser.
Hi, I'm here, and I'm an attorney representing children with disabilities, and I also have 2 kids with disabilities.
Thanks, Michael. Michelle Lee, I'm here. I'm an advocate. And next up, we have Nicholas Robertson.
I'm here. I'm representing the National Federation of the Blind of Illinois and the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Thank you. Next up, Howard Wilson.
Howard Wilson, I'm here. I'm a member of National Federation of the Blind.
Thanks. Next up, we have Amy Serpy,
Hi, excuse me. Hi, Amy Serpy. I'm the manager for ADA compliance programs for Chicago Transit Authority.
Thanks, Amy. And then last but not least, Michael Connolly.
And this is Mike Connolly. I'm glad to be here with you today. I'm not a committee member, but I am the Chief Planning Officer for CTA. So I'm here to staff this meeting. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Mike. So it looks like we have everyone here except Lovell. We do have a quorum because we have 7 people here. And I'll turn it over to Joe for announcements.
Thank you very much, Michelle. This is Joe again. Does anyone on the committee have any disability-related announcements or events they would like to mention that would be of interest to everyone? And if so, please identify yourself and speak up.
This is Robin Jones. I would just like to alert people to the fact that the Department of Justice will be doing a webinar with us on April 29th that will be covering the Amtrak settlement agreement related to people with disabilities. And that is a free session. They will be reviewing the settlement and how to enroll as a class member in that settlement. And that settlement deadline is in May, so it's kind of a short timeline, but you can access that if you're interested in attending at www.ada-audio.org to register. And that's from 1 to 2:30 p.m. on the 29th of April.
This is Joe. Thank you, Robin. Anyone else? Well, if there's no other announcements, I will turn it back over to Michelle for approval of the minutes.
All right, this is Michelle. So all of the meeting minutes for the prior meeting were sent to the members beforehand. Does anyone have any changes to the minutes or amendments? If not, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
I move that we approve the minutes from the previous meeting.
Okay, Michael, motions to approve. Can I get a second, please?
Robertson, second.
And Nicholas Robertson, seconds. And then for the vote, I'm just going to ask all in favor, just in the interest of time. All in favor, please.
Aye.
Anyone abstaining or not in favor? Okay, motion is approved. And then I'll turn it over to Joe for public comment.
Thanks, Michelle. This is Joe again. Regarding public comments, I'm going to turn this over to Amy Serpy, who's a manager of the ADA compliance programs. Amy, would you mind just kind of giving us sort of a brief overview of how we've been handling public comments during this virtual time that we're working with now, as well as do we have any public comments that you have received?
Today, we actually do not have any public comment. But for future meetings, if people do have a public comment for the virtual meetings, they need to call me, and either their public comment, I will write it down, they can dictate it to me, and I will read it into the minutes, or they can, that's really the best way to do it, is to call me. But at this point, we do not have any public comment for this meeting.
Okay, thank you, Amy. This is Joe again. With that said, I'm going to turn it back over to Michelle to take us through the presentations by CTA.
Thanks, Joe. This is Michelle again. So first up, we are having the Red Line Extension project update. And here we have Marlise Fraternardo, if you wouldn't mind giving us an update.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm here to present on the Red Line Extension, and I'll be covering most of the presentation, and Sonali Tandon will be covering the last couple of slides. So we have the presentation available. Oh, here we go.
Yes, I'm pulling it up now. I'm sorry.
Great. That's fine. Thank you. Wanted to make sure it wasn't me.
No, it's me. 1 second.
Before we start, this is Michelle again. If there are any photos or anything visual, if you wouldn't mind, just as a reminder, just to give us a quick, update or like talk us through it. Thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great.
Bear with me 1 second.
So while the presentation is coming up, I can just talk through a little bit about the agenda and what this update will contain.
There you go.
Oh, great. Excellent. Thank you. It's beautiful. So yeah, we just have a brief presentation. I'll be going through a project overview, discussing some of our, which will include just some basics about the project and some of the project benefits. Also taking a look at some of our public outreach activities. And Sonali will be presenting on the Transit Supportive Development Plan and some of the improvements that we're exploring for the future Red Line Extension stations. So if we can move to the next slide, please. And actually, we can even hop beyond that. Perfect. All right. So if anyone's familiar with the project, there's an image shown here of the preferred alignment or the route for the red line extension that CTA selected in 2018. So this slide is a general overview of the project. And I'll begin by starting to say that the far south side is the only area where CTA's rapid rail transit service stops short of the city's border. So as a result, the transit trips to jobs, schools, and all the other trips of daily life are much longer for far south side residents than they are for others in the city. So this project would help address that situation. So the project extends the CTA Red Line from the 95th Dan Ryan station to the 130th Street area at Alkeld Garts. And I'll be discussing Alkeld very briefly in a couple slides. So just want to make a note that that's our terminal station at for the project. So the project would build 4 new stations at 103rd, 111th, Michigan Avenue near 116th, and at 130th. Each station will have bus connections and park and ride facilities, and all of our stations will be fully accessible. The next slide discusses the project's key benefits, and there's a graphic shown that just is a kind of more visual of the benefits that I'll be talking about. So the Red Line Extension Project area is home to nearly 100,000 residents and 36,000 households. So it's a substantial project area. And our project is really about improving equity in the city and providing an affordable rapid transit option to underserved areas. And within this project area, is a higher percentage of people who live below the poverty level than in the rest of the city of Chicago. So just a couple more stats on the equity point. About 1/3 of the projected trips are expected to be made by transit-dependent riders. So these are households without, no cars who are relying on transit pretty exclusively. 16% of residents in the Red Line Extension Project area identify as having a disability, and this is a higher percentage than in the city of Chicago. So that's 16% in the project area for the Red Line Extension, and it's city of Chicago and Cook County, that's around 10%. So the extension would help increase access to services and facilities for persons with disabilities. And also the senior population in our project area is 65 and older is 17%, which is also a little bit higher than in Cook County and in the city. So in regard to the frequency of the rail service, the Red Line Extension will provide far south side residents with a 20 minutes of time savings to riders traveling from the 130th Street station to the and the project would also enhance connectivity city. And there's an interesting fact that 30% of riders who board in Ryan Station today and their trips in the loop. So actually, most riders are going other places throughout the city and traveling to other lines and using CTA services. So, this project will help feed riders into the city system. And as far as economic opportunity, the project would facilitate access to jobs within an hour commute of the Red Line Extension project area, and that number would increase by 46%. So it sort of unlocks access to a substantial amount of jobs. And the final benefit listed on this slide is just sustainability benefits, a critical importance, and the using a public transit option helps contribute to improving air quality, reduces greenhouse gas emissions, and saves energy. So the next slide just shows some of the key milestones that the project has met in recently. And the slide, it's really a focus on 2020. So I'll just run through a few major things that happened on the project in 2020. So the project brought on its preliminary engineering consultant, and this is the team that's conducting the necessary environmental reviews to develop to develop the 30% plans and all the environmental documents that CTA must prepare. So that happened early last year. And then soon after that, a supplemental environmental assessment document was also needed to be required for the project. So that's another environmental document that we're working on now. And the big news is that last year in December, the Federal Transit Administration approved CTA's request to enter the project development step or phase of the Federal Capital Investment Grant Program. So we're now officially a new starts project within that federal program, which is really exciting. And that is a 2-year time clock that begins ticking once you enter. So over the next couple of years, we will be completing that supplemental environmental assessment and also obtaining our final environmental impact statement and record of decision. So we're expecting that in mid-2022. So with our formal entry into the New Starts program, CTA provided an update project schedule to the public last December. So our public schedule is 2025 is for the construction start date, and then 2029 for revenue service. So next slide, switching gears completely to our outreach activities. So this slide has an image that shows a meeting flyer that we provided earlier this year in hard copy and electronic formats. So what this slide is about is, how the project has had to pivot to deal with the devastating effects in our outreach activities of the whole of COVID-19 pandemic. So the project team had to shift our project's approach in order to provide a safe and socially distanced public outreach for last year, which was just when we began to hold quite a few public meetings. And we've continued this, of course, into 2021. So all of our public outreach meetings were moved to a virtual format. So this slide, really just provides some information about what we did and how we got the word out. So we've been using Zoom and Facebook Live to host a series of larger public virtual meetings in December and again in January and in February. We've provided American Sign Language, captioning, and Spanish translation at each meeting. And we did receive quite a bit of positive feedback from community members and our agency partners at these meetings, including direct feedback from members of the deaf and hard of hearing community who attended. And we also had several participants who required accessibility accommodations attended. So we're really happy to know that these virtual efforts were successful in reaching people who wanted to learn more about the meeting and participate. So our Zoom records show we had close to 70 participants at each meeting, and which of course is residents and faith-based groups, representative from local nonprofits and some of our agency partners. And we also developed a public engagement website that provides public opportunity to provide feedback to the project team outside the bounds of a typical meeting where we would collect that feedback. So people are able to log on at any point, day or night, and provide feedback on our project. So COVID-19 has not slowed our outreach, and we'll be continuing to meet virtually as long as needed. So at this point, I will pass it to Sonali to discuss our Transit Supportive Development Plan work.
Thank you, Marlies, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sonali Tandon, Senior Manager for Strategic Planning Rail at CTA, and I'll be covering a couple slides here. This one is on Transit Supportive Development Plan, and there are two images on this slide that show the conceptual renderings of the 103rd Street station from the RLE video. CTA has initiated working on a transit supportive development plan for the RLE project to encourage development with the new proposed transit infrastructure. This plan will integrate transit planning with land use planning and explore the type of development that could be supported by transit in the community. And in turn, the new development will support transit. We are also partnering with city's Department of Planning and Development and the Cook County Land Bank Authority on this effort. And this effort is funded by a FTA grant. So the purpose of this transit supportive development or TSD study is twofold. First, to leverage the investment of the project, of this transit project, and to bring the greatest economic benefit to the community by developing a vision for development along with this transit line. And secondly, to support the RLE project's federal New Starts grant application, because we'll be requesting federal grant to construct this project. The TSD plan will integrate principles of ETOD, or equitable transit-oriented development. ETOD planning seeks to promote development without the displacement of existing residents and achieving community-focused benefits such as affordable housing, local economic development, and environmental sustainability. It is also a driver for more vibrant, prosperous, and resilient neighborhoods that put people of color as well as lower and moderate income residents at the center. In addition to identifying infrastructure needs and multimodal connectivity, this plan will also identify specific opportunities for mixed-use transit supportive development. And the implementation plan will identify possible tools to support economic development, affordable housing, and other key goals, and will ensure that there are actionable results by working hand in hand with our city partners. The planning process has a robust public outreach component, as Marlies just went over the public outreach that we have done so far. And future meetings are planned for later this spring and summer. Next slide. So this slide covers future RLE stations. Accessibility provides greater inclusiveness, and the RLE stations will include the standard accessibility features such as accessible entrances, doors, accessible fare arrays, and accessible routes from curbs to platform, enhanced lighting as appropriate, audible announcements, and accessible employee facilities. Other features that we are exploring as we move further in the station design would include wayfinding or directional signage, contrasting stair treads that were also identified as part of the All Stations Accessibility Program collaboration and was piloted at Grand Station as part of recent rehab work. And elevator floor materials will be some of the features that we'll be looking into as the design is further developed. And at this early stage of design, currently we are aiming for 30% design by mid next year. The design team is very mindful of the passenger flows that would make navigating the environment of stations easier and more intuitive for people with wide variety of disabilities. That's all we have. We are happy to answer any questions.
This is Joe. I have a question, goes back to the first presentation by Marlies. You had mentioned that 16% of the project targeted area contains people with disabilities. Do you know how you guys reach those numbers? And the reason I'm asking is because when I was with the city, I know we were always looking at ways to try to get an accurate count of people with disabilities that live in Chicago. So do you know how you guys reached that 16% number?
Yeah, I can speak to that. My understanding, and I don't have but that it was developed from the American Community Survey, which is a census-related product. And I believe since it was from, we're sort of in between years, I think that was a 2019 update to those numbers. And I do want to note that that was really limited to it's custom to our specific project area, which doesn't, it has kind of a, its unique geography. And I don't have an image of that actual area that was used, but yeah, my understanding is that data was pulled from the census.
Okay, thank you.
This is Whitney Hill, and to kind of piggyback off of that question, I was wondering, do you also break down the type of disability with that survey?
My understanding of that data set is that it doesn't provide that level of detail on that. So we need to follow up and see, what, groups were considered in that. But yeah, it's not that granular.
Thank you.
This is Michelle. Do we have any other questions? If not, thanks so much, Marlies, and also Sonali, for your presentations. We really appreciate it. Keep us updated, and also if we, can be of help to the design team or anything like that, we're, happy to be a resource as well. So appreciate the update. The next up, we have a Government and Community Relations Department update, and Sam Smith, I'm going to turn it over to you if you're here. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation. My name is Sam Smith. I am the Vice President of Government Affairs for CTA. I've been here a little bit over a year, but have been in the transit space for about 12 years now. I'm also joined by our Director of Federal Legislative Affairs, Bart Ellifritz. I am going to give a very brief update and turn it over to Bart to provide more relevant, at least I believe, relevant legislative update, at least relevant to the committee. So at the state level, there's been a lot of activity, as you can probably imagine, with all the things that are going on. But what has been unique is that this is the first legislative session with new leadership, especially in the House of Representatives, but fairly new leadership in the Senate as well. And so a lot of folks in our industry are trying to adapt to the new normal, as it were, and trying to figure out how legislatively things will move under new leadership. That being said, over 4,000 pieces of legislation, individual legislation, has been introduced this session. Those are being processed, debated, going through the committee process. Currently, we're up against committee deadlines and chamber deadlines for bills to continue moving on. So this is an important time period in the spring legislative session. But as it relates to CTA, our focus has remained on funding, both operating funding in the wake of the current pandemic. I wouldn't say the wake, in the middle of this pandemic, maintaining the state funding that operating funding that we receive to support the operations, protecting that as best we can, and also obviously capital funding that we're also continuing to track and try to protect. The good news, if I can call it that, is that from a capital standpoint, funding has remained relatively stable. There are still some outstanding issues related to how state capital funding, the source of that funding, which has been a motor fuel tax primarily, and how robust that tax is given what has happened with travel habits in the pandemic. But like I said, it has remained pretty stable, and that is a good sign as it relates to our efforts regarding ADA and accessibility primarily. But there has been a lot more activity, more on point, happening at the federal level. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bart Ellifritz, who can provide the committee an update on some of those efforts. Bart?
Great. Thanks, Sam. As Sam said, my name is Bart Ellifritz, and I'm the Director of Federal Legislative Affairs for the CTA. And I think the first thing I would like to do is just thank this group for all of your work as it related to the ASAP plan that the CTA was able to put together. I know that this group put a lot of great input into that product, and I think that one of the things that was clearly a takeaway from that plan was one of our largest obstacles into making the CTA rail system fully accessible vertically was funding. And I know Sam touched on funding as it related to the state, and the federal government is no different in that, President Carter has been advocating tirelessly, ever since the plan was released, to try to find new sources of funding to help speed up the process by which we can make the system fully accessible. And there's a few areas that I'd like to just briefly mention, and then certainly happy to answer any of your questions in terms of places that we've been looking for additional funding, and in some cases, when it didn't exist, trying to create new sources. So the first thing I would mention is, I don't think this is a surprise to this group, but Senator Duckworth is been such a strong advocate for the CTA across the board, and specifically in the area of accessibility. And her staff is currently, as we speak, putting the finer touches on a piece of draft legislation that would, for the first time ever, actually create a discretionary grant program that legacy transit systems like the CTA could apply to for grant funding on a project by project basis, that we think will certainly benefit CTA in a large way and help us to get to that ultimate goal in a much more quicker way with a dedicated source of funding. So her office is working with a lot of our House members and U.S. House of Representatives as well. And it's actually, a really good time to be having this conversation, because this year, federal transportation programs get reauthorized usually every 4 or 5 or 6 years. And this is the year where we're scheduled to do that reauthorization. So it's really a great time to try to create a new program in general, but particularly for this purpose. I would also say that there's something called an earmark, which is basically an earmark is kind of a member of Congress says, I would like a specific amount of money to go for a specific project or a specific use. And for the first time in 10 years, the Congress is bringing earmarks back. And, there's clearly plenty of feelings about earmarks for and against, but CTA sees that as yet another avenue by which we can try to find, much needed resources for this purpose. And I think that, we will expect to see several requests for earmarks that will help to advance some additional projects to get them to full accessibility. And then the third thing that I would just mention, President Biden last week came out with his new administration's infrastructure proposal. It's very big and bold, as I think that, most of us probably think this country needs. But one thing that I would draw this group's attention to is that included in that package, he's called for $5 billion in accessibility upgrades for legacy transit systems. That is a very, very large sum of money specifically for this purpose that once again has never existed before. And I would also say that in addition to those directed resources, that package also calls for doubling of the existing sources of federal formula funds that CTA gets on an annual basis, which also is yet another possibility for investing further in accessibility projects. So, kind of those multiple buckets of money we think are all going to be great ways to continue to push the CTA towards this ultimate goal. So I'll stop there, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have about any of those areas.
This is Joe. I have a question. You had mentioned about CTA as a legacy transit service, and the money would be earmarked for such transit systems. Would you happen to have an idea or a guess of how many across the U.S. that would include? I know it might be an outrageous question.
I can't give you a specific number, but I think that there's kind of this very loose on the rail side that if you built your system kind of before the mid 1970s or 80s, you probably qualify in that. And it's all of the kind of larger city transit systems that you would think, largely East Coast plus the Clevelands and Chicagos and Pittsburghs of the world. But the Boston, New York, Chicago are kind of, Philadelphia are the 3-4 big ones that I would mention. And I would just say that this legislation is clearly still being drafted. So I do think that there's likelihood that the eligibility is going to be larger than just that subset that I just mentioned. But I think that, you'll probably see a little bit wider variety of projects, and it'll probably include the bus side to some degree too, not just the rail side. But for our purpose of trying to get to full accessibility on the rail side, that's kind of been our, kind of primary goal at this point.
Sure. Yeah. I was just wondering who our competition is.
Yeah. I mean, this is, just for a little context, CTA in the world of legacy transit systems is really kind of the national leader in terms of the number of our stations as a percentage of our system that are accessible. I know I was talking to some of my counterparts in New York, and I think that their subway system, they said, was 25 or 30% accessible. Over 100 stations are not currently accessible. So there's a lot of work to be done across the country, but I don't think that we want to pat ourselves on the back for where we are, even though we've made great progress, because until we get to 100%, we're not going to be satisfied.
So, well said. Thank you.
Sure.
This is Michelle. If we don't have any other questions, I have one last one. I just want to know how we as a group can support you guys, because obviously we're all working for the same things, towards the same possibility goal.
I would say you've done so much work on the front end, because without the ASAP plan, I think we wouldn't necessarily even be in a position to put our marker down to say, we've taken it upon ourselves to do this evaluation, and this is where we stand, and this is where we want to go. And I will tell you that in conversations that myself and President Carter and others have had with our congressional delegation and other legislative leaders, I don't think there's another system out there that has given as much thought to this subject as we as an agency have. And I think that's twofold. We're helping to drive the conversation of why these kind of buckets of money are necessary. But also I think that it lines us up really nicely for when those buckets of money do become a reality to apply for them and actually use them. So I do think that we will definitely take you up on your offer for help as we move forward. And as a few more details come to light. Right now, we talk to our legislators so much about this subject that I almost think they don't want to hear from us for a while until they get some of their ducks in a row. But I appreciate that offer, and I do think that there will be opportunities in the future to make those voices heard.
Thank you. This is Michelle. We really appreciate your updates, both Sam and Bart. Keep us updated as we needed, because the more accessibility, it's not just for the disability community, it's actually beneficial for everybody. Right? So
absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you both. So next up, we have the customer service report. And Kate, I'm going to turn it over to you. And just as a reminder, all of the members received the customer service reports prior to the meeting. And, if Kate, you want to talk to us through some highlights and updates, that'd be great. Thanks.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. My name is Kate Kennelly, and I am the acting general manager for customer service. Since I know the committee has received the copies of the report and that we are short on time today, I'm just going to provide a very brief synopsis of the information, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. So overall, in the first quarter this year, we logged 129 ADA complaints, which is up 14% from the previous quarter, but down 34% from the same period last year. These complaints represent 4% of all complaints logged, which is in line with recent trends over the last several quarters. The top issue reported was passengers reporting being passed at the bus stop with a total of 40 concerns. This is a small uptick, but still fairly typical to normal volume. Happy to answer any questions that anyone may have about the reports.
This is Whitney Hill. Do we know if maybe the pass up rate is higher because the bus might reach capacity because they just simply can't stop?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible that some of these are situations where a customer did not realize that the bus was to capacity. We generally ask that question. So we'll ask if the bus appeared crowded, but when you're standing on the street corner, you can't necessarily see how many people were on that bus. So we do have that bus capacity still in place. So it definitely could still be affecting. But we are very similar to last year. So quarter one last year, we had 41 concerns. And this year we had 40 during the same period. So we're very, very close to where we were.
Hi, this is Bridget Heyman speaking. I had a quick question for you, Kate. I was wondering, to put some of these numbers into context, can you give us an idea of overall ridership? Have you found that overall ridership on the buses has been going up again, or is it still greatly diminished due to the pandemic?
I don't have very recent ridership information. There has been some increases in ridership that I'm aware of, but we are still seeing, much fewer riders than we were prior to the pandemic.
So this is Bridget speaking. I'm just wondering if it's fair to compare it to previous years, since it's overall fewer people riding public transit and still the same number of complaints. So I was just wondering if there has been anybody kind of looking into that to see if there are any important correlations.
This is Amy. We will have some ridership information available a little later. Mike Conley is our expert for that. So there will be something coming up, Bridget.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much.
This is Michael Kaiser. I have a question also. What are bus drivers instructed to do if the bus is full? Do they just pass by the bus stop, or do they somehow signal that the bus is full? What do they do?
I can speak to that a little bit. If someone from bus operations may be able to provide better information, but in general, we do try to signal to customers that if a bus is at capacity, prior to passing by. But typically, operators are required to report if there's a situation where the bus is at capacity, to report that to our control center so that, they can receive instruction about what to do.
And, this is Whitney again. Is there any other format that the rider can, I guess, know in real time if the bus is at capacity?
Right now, there's not real-time information. There is ridership information on the dashboard that's on our website. It's not real-time, though. It's an aggregate of the previous, I think, 2 weeks of data, kind of an average crowding level.
And I guess this is Whitney again. I guess a follow-up question to that with just with COVID, being what it is, does CTA kind of see themselves implementing the capacity for buses for the foreseeable future? And if so, do you know if they are going to change how they communicate that to passengers?
You know, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. You know, we recently did change the capacity limits, so they were recently raised a little bit a few weeks back. So, you know, I'm not sure how long they'll be in place. I don't have the information to be able to help. Sorry.
This is Doreen from MOPD. Question about the how you track the complaints. I understand when people file the complaints and then CTA has to look into it, and then there's an outcome to the complaint. So what I'm wondering is if those outcomes could be included in the reports going forward. And like, for example, let's say, I think you said there were like 40 complaints, and you know, however many of them were bus pass ups, you know, the bus not stopping. Well, of those, the outcome, you know, how many of the outcomes were due to the bus being at full capacity? How many of them were due to bus bunching? How many of, you know, what, as far as the outcomes of the complaints, if those could be included in the future?
I can certainly look into it. In my department in customer service, we don't have that level of detail. So we are really just tracking in our database the complaints that come in. And then we track to make sure that we are reporting those to the appropriate departments for handling investigation and resolution. So I don't have that, you know, I don't have that level of detail as to what the investigation returned. You know, possibly someone from bus operations may be able to, you know, kind of weigh in and help us with that.
Yeah, Amy, is there anything that can be done about getting generalized, you know, outcomes of the complaints categorically as far as that?
I would have to investigate, Mike Conley, and I would have to sit down and see what's doable. I don't know. Excuse me. I don't know exactly how that would work in terms of just trying to figure out.
Yeah,
go ahead,
Amy. I was just going to say, what we'll do is circle back with operations and customer service and make sure that I understand what you're asking for is sort of what happened at the end of that, because, you know, what we're getting now is a report on the intake, which is what Kate is responsible for. As she said, she does the intake and then she brings it in, but it goes to the departments. And what we'll do is, Amy and I, between now and the next meeting, we'll get together with the operations folks and discuss how that is tracked and how that goes and see if somebody's keeping track of that specifically. If not, we'll see if we can start keeping track of that and then be able to develop some kind of a report to get back to you on that. So, okay. We'll take that on for next time.
Okay. And then you can give us an update at the next meeting.
Yeah. Yep.
And I would say at the very minimal, if it could be accessibility complaints or complaints from people with disabilities, but for the most part, I mean, idealistically all complaints, but and I wouldn't expect specifics on every single complaint, but generally speaking, you know, X amount were for this reason, and the outcome was, you know, 40% was this, 20% was this, and, you know, whatever percent was other. But yeah, some, and like I said, idealistically all complaints, but at the very minimal, I would say complaints either from people with disabilities or accessibility related complaints.
Okay.
And I'll just give you a quick example. Let's say that the driver wouldn't deploy the ramp. Okay, I didn't hear anything about that, but let's say that was reported like 10 times. The driver refused to deploy the ramp. You know, of course, we would want to know, you know, if it happened 10 times, what was it, you know, was 7 out of those 10 times, was it the ramp was not working? Was it, you know, what was the outcome, you know? So yeah, if we could get an update on that request at the next meeting, that would be great.
Awesome. So this is Michelle. If there's no more questions, we can move along to the next thing. Thank you so much, Kate, for your update. And sorry to put you on the spot there. I know you don't know all the answers, but we appreciate having the discussion. So thanks, Kate.
Mm-hmm.
And moving on, next topic of agenda is the Red Purple Modernization Program, or the RPM project. And I think we have Jeff on the line. I'll turn it over to you to give us an update.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see everyone. My name is Jeff Wilson. I'm the Director of Government Community Relations for the Chicago Transit Authority, and I am here to provide an update for the Red Purple Modernization Project, RPM. Before I continue, though, I would like to extend my gratitude and appreciation to Amy Serpy for helping us with the public outreach and public meetings that we had for the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr modernization section of the RPM project up north, where we had Zoom public meetings to address different categories associated with the project. And Amy was instrumental in helping us do the outreach for that. So to Amy, I extend my gratitude and thank you very much. In the interest of time, I only have a couple brief announcements. Within the Red Purple bypass area of the Red Purple Modernization Project, which is immediately north of Belmont, south of Cornelia, we are right now working on the steel erection component and the concrete pour for the bypass itself. We continue to work with the community and the Alderman Tunney's office of the 44th Ward to make sure that the public engagement with regards to accessibility is maintained throughout the construction site. That's both with street and sidewalk closures, as well as any mitigation efforts that we have to do to keep the alleys and streets open. So that's in the RPB, or Red Purple bypass area. Moving north, we are about to start working on what we call the historic Von Travers building move, which may interest some of you. The Von Travers building is a turn of the century building located on the corner of Cornelia and Clark, that we are moving 35 feet to the west. So we're literally lifting the building up and moving it 35 feet west. As you can imagine, the prospects the component of moving that, as well as the community involvement, is going to be very high with that. And I look forward to working with the team here to make sure that we get all that information out to the community. As we go north from that, we start entering into the LBMM component of the Red Purple Modernization Project, which is Lawrence, Berwyn, Argyle, and Bryn Mawr. And for everybody in this group, we are about to enter what we call the Stage A component. We anticipate entering Stage A in mid-May. And Stage A is where we start doing all the heavy prep work and mitigation efforts for both closing the stations of Lawrence and Berwyn and keeping Bryn Mawr and Argyle open by building a temporary station at both of those locations. So mid-May, we begin that whole process. Currently, we're still working on the utility relocation aspect of it, but we anticipate fully engaged with the Stage A process of LBMM mid-May. And that is it for the RPM update. If anybody has any questions and concerns.
Yeah, Jeff, this is Joe. What's the level
Hey, Joe.
What's the level of, hi, Jeff. What's the level of accessibility of those temporary stations? What will that be?
So unfortunately, the temporary stations, the level of accessibility is basically the same as what we have now. with regards to the old stations, which is little to none. There is no elevator, there's no escalator that's going to be built. We will maintain basic, unfortunately, just basic accessibility stuff. Like we have the entrance to the 2 temporary stations are being built right now, and I will get the committee a full list of all the components that we're going to put into the temporary stations with regards to accessibility. And I'll do that this afternoon and send it to Amy.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Joe.
Thank you.
I think too, you might mention there will be lighting. There will always be customer service personnel at the temporary stations. So if people need additional support, etc., that will still be available. There will still be the tactile warnings. There will still be lighting. So it's just, there's not going to be the vertical accessibility. And I believe they're also taking out an escalator. So you won't have escalators either at this point. And then when everything is redone, it'll be beautiful. So
that's correct.
You got to go through a little bit of pain to get to the good stuff.
And this is Doreen. I have a question, Doreen from MOPD. The question that I have is, at the end of the project, how many more stations will be fully accessible than are accessible already?
Great question, Doreen. So all 4 stations, Lawrence, Berwyn, Argyle, and Bryn Mawr, will be fully accessible at the end of this project in the end of 2024.
Okay.
So all 4 of those stations will be fully accessible.
So on the entire red line, when this project is over, there'll be 4 more stations that will be 100% accessible.
Yes, ma'am.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
This is Michelle. If there's no other questions, I want to thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate always the updates. I do like the vest. I want a vest too. So that's my question. How do we all get the vest?
My bad.
I'm kidding. So thank you.
I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay. It's, CTA pride, right? Next up on the agenda, we have...
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Jeff. Next up on the agenda, we have the General Construction Report and Infrastructure Maintenance Update. And that's with Tanisha. If I'm going to turn it over to you. And just as a reminder, whenever anyone's speaking and even for questions, please state your name first. Thank you. Oh, I think you're on mute, Tanisha. This is Michelle. We can't hear you still. Sorry.
Okay. Hello.
Oh, this is Michelle. We can hear you now.
Thank you. Tia, are you able to bring up the presentation? Perfect. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Tanisha Marshall. I am the Vice President of Capital Construction at CTA. And today I will be providing the quarterly update on the All Stations Accessibility Program for Phase 1. Next slide. So to quickly highlight the components of the ASAP program, this slide shows a chart from the ASAP report that breaks out the 42 inaccessible stations into 4 categories. The first of these categories is the ASAP Phase 1, which includes 8 stations. Also, we have 16 stations that are in the future ASAP phases, 10 stations that will be part of the future phases of the RPM, and the remaining 8 stations that will be part of a larger Forest Park Branch reconstruction program. All 8 stations in the ASAP Phase 1 are now funded, and I'll take this time to provide a brief overview of those stations. Next slide, please. Okay. So this is the State and Lake. Just to provide you an update from our last meeting, CDOT is leading the reconstruction of the State and Lake Station downtown. CDOT has advanced the project from 15% conceptual to 30% initial design. We are reviewing and providing comments to CDOT. Ongoing coordination. Right now, this is expected to complete design by next year, 2022. And at this time, CDOT has not released the details of their proposed construction schedule. So as we have it, I'll be sure to share it with the group. Next slide, please. Yep. So this station is one that CTA had prioritized for recent funding requests through federal and local sources, together with the Surface Transportation Program Shared Fund and the new state program. CTA was able to secure all required funding for this project. The Austin Green Line Station is a $25.5 million project that addresses accessibility from the street all the way to the station platform and onto the train. Modifications include the addition of an ADA compliant ramp between the street level and the station house, accessible curb cuts, a new elevator, and improved signage to enhance pedestrian safety and wayfinding. We do have a designer on record, and that is Epstein. They've recently started their 30% design phase. So design for this will continue throughout the year, and construction is expected to start late next year and go through Q4 of 2023. Okay, thank you. Congress Racine Station. So we're happy to report that due to funding from the Rebuild Illinois Capital Program, CTA is able to accelerate one of the Forest Park branch stations, which will now be completed in ASAP Phase 1. This project scope includes reconstruction of the Racine Station House, a new elevator, a stair, and a platform extension, along with a new ADA accessible ramp at the Loomis entrance. We have 4 SBEs that have been awarded and work is ongoing. The GEC is currently in negotiations with a notice to proceed targeted date for late June, designed to start later this year and go until next year. A GC procurement is scheduled to start in Q2 of next year to Q1 of 2023, with construction from 2023 through 2024. Okay, California. So the California Blue Line Station, this is a $36 million project. Modifications include the addition of 2 new elevators, station renovations, and increasing the width of the platform to accommodate a wheelchair and also high volume ridership. The SBE task order has been advertised and proposals are due this week. The GEC task order will be advertised in May of this year, so next month. Next slide. Montrose Blue Line Station. So this is a $17 million project and will improve the station's accessibility, including improved sidewalks, crosswalks, and curb ramps, as well as the installation of 2 new elevators and other station and platform upgrades. This GEC task order is anticipated to be advertised in Q3 of this year. Both of these projects, the California and Montrose, are funded by the Rebuild Illinois, and design work is anticipated to start this year, with construction beginning in 2023. So I'm happy to report that all of our Phase 1s are in design development stage. Happy to answer any questions.
Hi, this is Doreen from MOPD. So for the Blue Line, Montrose, California, and Racine, those are the 3 stations on the Blue Line that will be fully accessible. 3 additional stations at the end of the project.
Yes, they won't be fully accessible until about 2024 when the construction is over. Yes.
Right, but those 3 will be. And then the other one that was mentioned, you mentioned State and Lake. That's red, green, and orange, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so that one would that one, that's an additional one on the I know it's red, green, and orange, but on the red line. So actually, even though they're separate projects, there'll be 5 more stations on the red line that will be fully accessible within the coming years, let's just say, correct?
I'm sorry, can I interrupt? This is Bill Mooney, the Chief Infrastructure Officer. So this is State and Lake, the elevated station, and it doesn't, and so the red line station associated with it is Lake on the red line, and it's currently accessible.
And that's a subway. Okay, yeah. Okay, so it's, okay, so it only pertains to green and orange then?
It's green, orange, brown, pink, and also facilitates the Purple Line Express.
Okay, got it. So, Okay, so it won't be the subway part, it'll only be the elevated part. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, the subway is already currently accessible.
Right. Okay. Yeah, this is my first meeting since 2014, so there's, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Bill.
Yes, thank you.
This is Michelle. I have a quick question, and then hopefully, I'm not sure who to ask, but maybe Tanisha, you could help. So before the stations go into the construction phase, the design has to be approved. And I'm wondering if our committee can be of any help to look over the designs or anything like that, because sometimes, the architects are very well intentioned and everything is to code, but in reality, when a person with a disability moves through it, we can kind of tell, even looking at the design, if it's going to work or not. So I'm wondering if we could maybe take a look and maybe give you guys some input, if that would be possible, if that's a possibility, because when you retrofit something, it's much more expensive, right?
Sure, I can definitely work with Amy to get the information to you. When is the best time to provide feedback? Like the 30%, 60%?
I would say
what they need.
Right. This is Michelle. I mean, we're here to be a resource to you. So whatever you think is most appropriate. We would hate to have it be 100% done, designed, and then find flaws, right? That would be not ideal. So I'll leave that up to you.
And this is Whitney Hill. To piggyback off of that, same too. If you have any wayfinding that you're laying out, any signage. I'm chair of the wayfinding subcommittee here at the CTA, and so I would love for our committee to also take a look at that. Same as Michelle said, at whatever percentage of completion is great, but the sooner or the earliest will probably be best. But we're always here if you if you need extra eyes.
We'll definitely put you down as one of the review. This is Tanisha Marshall. Sorry. We'll definitely put you down as one of the reviewers at some point during the design phase.
And this is Doreen from MOPD again. And does it go without saying that these plans will go through MOPD's Accessibility and Compliance Unit for review?
That is one of our agency coordinations. So yes.
Great. Thank you.
This is Michelle again. If there's no more questions, I really want to thank Tanisha. Thank you so much for the updates. We always are excited to hear on when things are funded and things are designed. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
And next up on the agenda, we have the elevator escalator efficiency report. And I think Lenny, I'm going to turn it over to you if you're here.
Yes, I'm here. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lenny Romano. I am the General Manager of Facilities Maintenance, which maintains and repairs all elevators and escalators at the CTA. The reports were initially distributed to you guys. So I'd be happy to kind of walk through if you have any questions. If not, I'll kind of give you a brief, just little percentages of what we've accomplished so far in the first quarter of 2021, along with the elevator status or the elevator uptimes. We also completed sill supports as well as platform replacements in the first quarter. We've completed the floors as well in the first quarter. We had 2 stations on the Red Line that had new floors installed on the elevators, as well as in the escalator world. We have 6 modernizations, or as we call them, heavy maintenance, that are ongoing currently right now. We have an additional 4 more that will be scheduled for sometime second, third, and fourth quarter of 21. So that's kind of a brief overview. Be happy to take any questions you may have.
This is Joe. Lenny, what are the stations that received the new elevator floors most recently?
The most current ones were Fullerton on the Red Line. Both elevators at Fullerton had floors replaced.
Okay.
We also completed, we're in the process of completing an additional, I believe, 3 more. I don't have those locations for you, but I can tell you one will be, I think it was Belmont. Belmont was completed last year, but we have an additional 3 more that are on the schedule that I can provide to you guys.
Okay, thanks. This is Joe.
Okay.
This is Michelle. If there's no more questions, we really appreciate the update, Lenny. I appreciate it. The elevator is really important. As a wheelchair user, I definitely need working floors. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yes.
Next up,
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have ridership updates, and that's going to be turning it over to you, Mike.
Thanks. This is Mike Connolly, and Chief Planning Officer for CTA. I'll just give you guys a quick update. Ridership has maintained very well in parts of the CTA system. And we're retaining more than half of our ridership on particular routes on the south and west side of the city. These routes have retained a strong ridership throughout the pandemic period. There was a slight dip during the pandemic surge in the spring, and then during the surge that occurred in late fall into winter as well. Ridership is now increasing slowly, about a percentage or two a month, very, very slowly. But it has reached levels comparable to our pandemic high point, which was actually during the pandemic in October of last year. That was the highest point, and then it dipped down when we had the surge and things were closed down again. And now that things are reopening and the weather is turning warmer, we're seeing that come up again. That's a seasonal thing, and for us, usually our highest ridership months are generally October and May. And so we'll see. We saw October being our highest ridership month last year, if you exclude January and February before the pandemic, and we'll see what happens this year. So we are tracking it. At the lowest point last April, right at the onset of the pandemic, system ridership was down about 70% from prior year's levels. So we were only carrying about 30% of our normal ridership. The ridership on rail was reduced by about 80%, only carrying 20% of the rail ridership. And the bus ridership only went down about 68%. So we retained a higher percentage on bus. Currently, the system overall, the system ridership is down about 65% from pre-pandemic levels. Bus ridership is down about 58%, and rail ridership is down about 74%. We have been reaching a system ridership of 500,000 people on weekdays in the last 2 weeks, and that was what we also did back in October of last year. You have to remember, pre-pandemic, we were carrying about 1.4 million riders on an average weekday. So 500,000 is actually a pretty significant number. The daily ridership levels are not following the same pattern as our historic weekday profiles. There's a very reduced morning peak, not a very big morning peak, and then a rise in ridership that starts during the late morning, about 11 o'clock in the morning, and lasts until late afternoon. This new normal ridership profile for us has meant a less demanding peak service pattern. So we have less service needed during the AM and the PM peak, and more service needed during the midday into the early evening. CTA shifted our articulated 60-foot long buses away from peak hour long distance express routes along the lakefront and onto heavy north-south or east-west arterial routes to allow more room for social distancing on the busiest routes. These crosstown routes form a significant basic grid and have been providing needed mobility for many of our customers. The return of students to Chicago Public High Schools next Monday on April 19th will also serve to increase afternoon ridership, but only by a small percentage. It's not a lot. And one thing I'll note is that the lakefront will be open this summer, unlike last summer. The Park District is hiring lifeguards, and they're planning to open the lakefront, the beaches, from Memorial Day to Labor Day. For that, it means that unlike last summer, CTA will operate our normal beach extension services on the Montrose bus, the North Avenue bus, the 35th Street bus, and the 63rd Street bus routes. Those are extended several blocks during the summer to go right to the beach and turn around and get people right to the beach. We expect to see continued ridership growth in a slow but steady rise during upcoming months. And so with that, I'll stop and be glad to answer questions if people have questions about ridership.
Mike, this is Joe. What's your opinion on why the ridership decrease is so much greater on rail as compared to bus?
I would say it's a difference in the profile of the riders. Rail riders tend to be riders who can work from home. I guess I would characterize it as that. So they're teleworking with a laptop or a computer at home and not going into their office. Whereas our bus ridership tends to be more what I would characterize as blue collar workers who are required to be on the job. So the accountant may be riding the train and the dishwasher or the waiter is riding the bus. And I think that's probably the best way to characterize it. And the difference between bus and rail for us is that and there are a number of other factors, including race, including low income or levels. But I think that's probably the best way to put it, that the rail riders have less of a need to go into the office, and they're all teleworking. And the bus riders, many of them have to be there to do their jobs. And so they're going in.
Yeah, this is Joe. So in other words, the essential workers are the ones using the bus over the last year or so. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Mike. This is Bridget Heyman speaking. Thank you very much for that update. It's really fascinating, and it's great to hear that ridership is going up. I know that, we're going to be looking for some different data when it comes to complaints. And it does strike me that it is interesting that the number of complaints for ADA related things is similar to what it was last year and the year before, like what you're anticipating. So as we're looking at, the results of how these complaints were handled, it would also be great to know if there's a trend that we could see along specific routes. And chances are it's going to be the routes that people are using more often. But I think that's kind of what we're getting at as a committee. It would be great to be able to put some of this data in context so that we could see some trends that maybe we could address as a committee when it comes to training or handling complaints or anything like that. So we would really appreciate that since we're looking at getting some additional data anyway.
Yeah, I'll be glad to do that, Bridget. I understand what you're asking for, and what we'll try to do is index that against the ridership levels and the complaint levels, so we can see if they rise or fall together, or if there are trends in there. So we'll take a look at that and see what we can come up with for you guys. Okay.
This is Michelle. One quick question for you, Mike, regarding ridership. You're saying that ridership is going up, but social distancing is still being enforced or encouraged. And I think Kate mentioned that the ridership, the limits were increased. Can you talk about what the current levels are, and also generally, if it's very full, the bus. Will the bus driver still stop and let somebody know, hey, sorry, the bus is full, we're going to keep needing to go, or will they just continue driving? I guess, that's a two-part question, but.
It's okay. I guess what I'll say is we've added a bus full head sign on the buses, so that when that happens and the bus is full, the operator can select that, and then the bus sign will tell people this bus is full. And so that's one of the options that we put for communicating with the customers. I've seen it where I was passed by. I ride still all the time, but I was passed by on the Chicago Avenue route by an operator, and he slowed. He stopped at the stop. He opened his rear door and let somebody out, but he said, "I'm full. I can't bring anybody else on here." And he did. He kind of waved his hands and said no, but then he put his. And he said, behind me, and I looked up the street and I could see the next bus coming. So I just waited for the next bus there. But his sign said that, this bus may be full, catch follower. And so I did. So that communication is going on. I also was on a bus the other day where 3 people got off and 4 of us got on. And the bus operator said, oh, we're one over our limit here. And the guy in the front seat said, well, I'm getting off at the next stop, so it'll be okay. And we did. We went around the corner, stopped at the next stop, and that guy got off, and 2 other people got off too. So then we were down below the limit. The limit was recently raised. We've been in continuous communication with the Chicago Health Department about our social distancing on the buses, and we've talked to them about it. We think we're getting about 98% mask wearing on the bus. We've got very few people refusing to wear a mask. I think we talked with you guys before about putting mask dispensers on the buses. That's coming along, and they're actually installing the mask dispensers, and we appreciate the feedback about, I think Bridget was the one who noted the inaccessibility of that one location. And so they've been moved now to be on the wheel wells right there so that they're much easier to get to. And they are still being installed, and the buses that don't have a mask dispenser, the operator takes a box of masks with them when they leave the garage in the morning. As they check out the window and pick up their paperwork and find out what their bus assignment is, they pick up a box of masks. And they bring them with them on the bus. And if somebody gets on without a mask, and I've seen this happen too, the operator offers one. Guy said, "Oh, I don't have a mask." And the operator said, "Well, here, now you have a mask. Please put it on." And the guy said, "Oh, yeah." But he put on his mask, so he was okay. But we've gone from, we were limiting it to 15 riders on a 40-foot bus and 22 riders on a 60-foot bus or on a rail car. And so those were our limits. We've raised that now that we think we've got better masking going on to 20 riders on a 40-foot bus and 30 riders on a 60-foot bus or on a rail car. The reason that the bus and the rail car and the 60-foot bus are the same, the rail car is only 48 feet long, but it's 2 feet wider than the bus. The bus is 60 feet long, but it's narrower. It's only 8 feet inside, and the rail car is actually 10 feet inside. So it's much bigger, a lot more room in the rail car. And I've been on a rail car and a bus with 20 and 30 people. I ride all the time. So I'm whatever. I'm a pioneer out here. So I keep doing it. But we are constantly talking to the Chicago Health Department about what's the right way to do this as things open up. We need to be able to respond to increases in ridership, and so we're keeping an eye on it. Right now, we're at a point where we think we're covering everybody that needs to happen, although we're still having complaints about turned away riders or about crowded buses. And we'll keep an eye on those. We'll continue to keep an eye on those as we transition through this.
This is Michelle.
Sorry, I don't know if I answered both your questions, Michelle, but
you did. Thank you.
And this is Whitney, and this is just a continuation of the question that I originally asked for Kate. So with the tracker that is on the front of the bus, are there any future plans to provide that information online so that people who might not be able to have that same experience as you, I guess, as the bus came up, or see that that it was full? Is there any, I guess, future developments and plan to kind of put that information in real time online?
Well, and I would say Kate Keneally mentioned that we do have a dashboard online for both bus and rail. And what it does is it's a predictor of whether the bus will be crowded or not crowded, or the train will be crowded or not crowded. You go into the dashboard, you indicate your stop that you're getting on, if it's a rail, or the line that you're going to be running on, and then it will tell you all of the stops along the line. And if you want to say 10 a.m. or I want to ride at 8:30 a.m., and you'll get a different answer for each of those as to how crowded that will be. That's based on, as Kate mentioned, the last 2 weeks of data. So it's available for every bus route, every time of day, and for every rail line for every time of day as well. They're dashboards for what you see. It's in the COVID section of the CTA website. But we are looking at right now an experiment. We're working with several tech people who are very good at tech cutting edge work. And we're looking at the 79th Street bus route, which runs right across the south side. It's one of our key network routes. And it has retained a very high level of ridership. And we're going to go in there and we're going to try to use several different ways of counting the number of people on the bus and then reporting that out in a cell phone data link. And so we are trying to advance something. It looks very difficult to do, but what we would like, ideally, you'd be able to stand at the corner, pull up the next bus from which bus stop you're at, and it will tell you how full that bus is. That's what we'd like to get to. And this experiment on 79th Street is focused on one route with just a limited number of buses and, of course, a limited number of stops. But we're gonna give these guys about a year to try to figure this out. They're doing some things with LiDAR, like a linear radar type read, and they're doing some things with weight, and they're doing some things with light blocking, and they're doing some things with closed circuit cameras, which we have on the buses, and then putting some artificial intelligence into those closed circuit cameras to predict how many people are actually on the bus, how many seats are full, how many standees, and that kind of thing. So we're headed in that direction, but it's not available right now.
And thank you. That's good to know, because the main thing that I keep thinking about is, there's limited number of accessible seating on the bus. And so if there is, let's say, a bus stop that is around a location where there might be more wheelchair users, or where those seats might need to be accessed, how that is getting conveyed. And so this is really encouraging to hear that you guys are looking at other ways to kind of convey more detailed information. So thank you for that.
And it's 3:00. I have another report for you, but I'll make it very quick. It's on the budget, the CTA budget situation. If it's okay, we'll go ahead. I don't know if is that fine, Michelle?
This is Michelle. I think if we can keep it brief, we should keep going. Yeah.
So very quickly, the CTA budget for 2021 will be balanced by our receiving a boost of about $476 million of funding approved by the RTA board last month. This funding includes federal funds from the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, or CRISA as it's been called, which are being used this year to support continued operations of CTA transit services. The CARES Act money got us through 2020 and into the first couple months of this year, and the CRISA fund will get us all through the rest of 2021. Metro and Pace are also receiving the CRISA funds and got a substantial boost in operating funding. You may already know that due to the pandemic, all ADA paratransit trips are being scheduled as individual trips with just one rider per vehicle at a time. And that's a very different situation, and it has driven up paratransit costs for the region dramatically because you can't schedule 5 or 6 people on the van or on the minibus. It's only one person at a time. And so the first use of the CRISA, the federal funds, when they came out, was to fully fund paratransit for the year. And then we looked at dividing the remainder up between CTA, Metro, and PACE to get us through the year. With the recent passage of the American Rescue Plan, or ARP Act, there'll be another round of federal operating funding coming to the region, probably late summer sometime. The exact distribution between the agencies is still to be determined, but we believe that it will carry us through 2022 and 2023 going forward. There's also the possibility, as Bart mentioned, of some form of infrastructure bill passed this summer. The administration has introduced a bill they call the American Jobs Plan, but it's also called Build Back Better. And this should assist CTA with advancing some of our significant projects, such as the Red Line extension, continued work on ASAP, and the electrification of our bus fleet, as well as addressing a backlog of many unfunded state of good repair needs. I'll stop. Thank you.
This is Michelle. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate the update. It's always good to hear about the budget. Next up, I'm going to turn it over to Joe. Take it away.
Thank you, Michelle, for running us through those presentations. This is Joe again. We'll kind of briefly go over the subcommittee reports. First up is funding advocacy. As most of you know, Adam Ballard, he was the chair of that subcommittee, and he had to step down from the committee at large. So 2 points to that. Number one, if anyone's interested in being the chair of the Funding Advocacy Committee, please let Amy, myself, or Michelle know that. And 2, is anyone from the committee ready to make a presentation at this point? If not, we'll move right along to the next subcommittee, which is Safety, Training, and Technology. Bridget, do you have anything to report on this?
Yes, I have something quick to report. Thank you very much, Joe. This is Bridget speaking. We are hoping to have a subcommittee meeting in May. The materials for that meeting and details about accessibility and such will be sent out late next week. So I will be in touch with you, Joe, and Michelle about that as well. I know I have the whole list of folks that are on the committee who are interested in being part of this subcommittee and attending that meeting, but I wanted to be sure to say to folks who might be attending today who are not members of the ADA Advisory Committee. The subcommittees are open to everyone who are interested in accessibility. And so again, this is a safety, training, and technology committee, and everyone is welcome. So if you are interested in attending, please be sure to email me. Thank you very much.
Thank you for bringing up those points, Bridget, very much. Any questions for Bridget? If not, we'll move on to our final subcommittee group, which is wayfinding. Whitney, anything to report?
At the moment, I have nothing to report. I am hoping to get the subcommittee together again in May sometime. Our last meeting was in February. And so with all the new information that we've gathered from today will be our main talking points for our meeting. And to once again piggyback off of what Bridget said, if anyone is interested in the wayfinding subcommittee and joining or just sitting in, please let me know. I'll be more than happy to tell you a little bit more about what we're doing and how you can get involved.
This is Joe. Great. Thanks, Whitney, for that update. Next, we'll move on to the facilitators report. Amy Serpy, of course, manager of ADA compliance programs. Amy, anything to report?
Just a real couple of really quick things. Number one, we're going to be getting those electric buses you've heard so much about, and Mike Conley and I have been talking. And we believe we're going to have some kind of a familiarization training, probably in June, where we will most likely use Jefferson Park Terminal because that's accessible to all the different modes of transportation, MetroPace and CTA. And we will have an opportunity for the committee and possibly others to basically see the buses, go on the buses, see, how, if they're different from the other buses that we've been using. But we thought that might be something that this committee would really be interested in doing. My one question will be, I will be sending out an email because we could either do things during the day on a work day, but then we thought, well, maybe people will be working. We can maybe do an evening thing. We've done some familiarization trainings later in the day, like 5 o'clock kind of thing, whether or not that'll work. Or maybe we could do a weekend, like a Saturday for something like this, where we'll have a couple of hours where people can sort of drop in and see the buses. So is this something that the committee would be interested in doing if we set that up? Probably for June, because it'll be nicer weather.
Most definitely.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. So I will work on that with Mike, and we'll see what we can put together again. So look for emails. And if I do send out an email and saying, well, when are you available? We're probably going to have to go with whatever works for most people. Okay, so it may not be the exact day that you want, but we'll look at what can facilitate everybody. So I did send out those statements of financial interest. We have two super duper members. I got to tell you guys, you got 2 people that already sent in their forms. So without mentioning any names, thank you, Michael Kaiser and Pam Berman.
You guys are overachievers.
Getting on top of that, yeah. Mike did talk about the mask.
Thanks a lot, Amy.
So Mike Conley did talk a little bit about the mask project that we are updating this on our buses, and we plan to have them on all buses. There will also be mask dispensaries at L stations. So when I get more information on that, I will be disseminating that to the committee. As he said, we still have that mask restriction in place. You are to wear a mask, even though maybe you got your shot or didn't get your shots, it doesn't matter. People still need to be in a mask, and operators are not required to put masks on you. That is one thing that we do not want them to do. That's personal stuff. So if you need assistance with that, maybe, have your PA or somebody helping you. And then lastly, and this sort of leads into the old business, if you want me just to throw this in, we talked about getting those 6 videos that RTA did about transportation onto our website. And we have a new a new guy who is helping Tony Capoletta in our department. His name is Will Anderson, and I'm working with Will to get those videos on our website. And again, when that happens, I'll let you know exactly where that link is, but we will have a link to that information. And that's about all I have.
This is Joe. Amy, thank you for those updates. Very valuable information. And that mentioned old business, which leads us to, is there any old business anyone wants to bring up at this point?
Joe, this is Bridget Heyman speaking. I actually had a question about the electric buses. I don't remember that being presented to the committee before, and I'm wondering if the buses themselves have already been designed. It would be interesting to look at the accessibility on those buses since they're a new part of the fleet, and I'm assuming a lot of them will be ordered. And so it would be good to take a look at them as a committee if we could.
So, and this is Mike Conley, Bridget. I appreciate your interest in it, and that's why Amy's going to try to set this up, partly because this is the first 6 buses. These are pilot buses. So we haven't authorized them to build any more, but they gave us 6. And so we're putting these 6 into service for about the next 6 months. And we're going to try them out. And they have a bunch of different features. They're certainly accessible and they're certifiable and everything else. But what we want to hear from you guys is, does this work? How does this wheelchair tie-down system work for you? Does it not work for you? Is it where you can get? Do you really have enough room to turn a wheelchair around in the vestibule there when the seats are flipped up? And then the ramp is a little different. This is a different manufacturer. So does this ramp work for you better or not? Does the floor height work? And it should be a softer ramp angle.
Oh, that's cool.
So that even if you're not on the curb and you have to actually go from street level up into the bus, it should still be a softer ramp angle, is what we've been told. Now, I'm not a wheelchair user, so I can't measure that myself. I could measure the angle and do it as a math problem. But that's what we want to get from you, because if there are changes that need to be made, we have time to do that before we tell them to make. This is part of an order of 23 buses, and we got the first 6 in. And actually only 3 of them are actually running right now. The other 3 are being outfitted with fare boxes and everything else. They also have, they talk to you as well. Some of you may have seen that on the PACE buses or other places where this bus is turning and the bus has a speaker at the corner and a little strobe light to warn people if you can't, because they're very quiet. And so warn people that the bus is actually coming. So this is something that it's on the bus.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's great to hear, Mike, that we're at early stages here. So that is wonderful to hear. I think trying it in person is one thing, which we absolutely want to do, but some written information about it too, so that we have that documentation, because we might be able to offer some immediate feedback even before we try it. It would be just great to have. So, and I'm excited to try it. But yeah, they are really quiet. And that's one of the things that I thought of initially for anyone who might be relying only on sounds, and not hearing the bus come at all. So, thinking through the process too for people with disabilities, the whole process of getting on and off the bus and waiting at the bus stop, there's a lot to think through, and it's really exciting to be a part of that.
This is Joe. Bridget, thank you so much for that feedback, and Mike as well, because that was actually a topic, these new electric buses was a topic in my new category, which we're moving into now, new items, because, as a person with a visual impairment myself, I'm always concerned, let's say, about these electric cars that are very quiet and the safety of being around those. So I'd like to see how that's addressed with these buses and provide feedback on that. With that said, any more new business anyone wants to talk about right now? If not, I'll turn it back over to Michelle to adjourn us.
All right, this is Michelle. Before we adjourn, I just want to remind everyone, our next meeting is Monday, July 12th, 2021. So July 12th, mark your calendars. Who knows where we'll be at that point in time. So it could be virtual, it could be not, but probably virtual. And let's see, I just need a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion, this is Whitney.
Thanks, Whitney. And need a second, please.
Robertson, second.
Oh, I think that was Nicholas. Nicholas Roberts, the seconds. And then for everyone in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And everyone opposed? Abstention? I think this motion passes. Thank you all for a great meeting. It's great to see everyone. Love to hear all the updates and happy riding the CTA, guys.
Michelle, I just want to quickly mention that for our committee, we will shortly begin the ethics training, and for the public, they will be dropped off of YouTube at this point.